law, and that we carry out our civic duties, pay our taxes, respect every part of the regulations that are legitimate regulations or laws. But a large chunk of the issues have to come from the government, because the government is the one we have all our source, our collective interests, our collective desires and wishes to, and expect them to drive those collective interests and wishes and desires. So because you and I really cannot change the narratives, we can only change the conversation. We can put it before and make it a topical issue and hope that we'll force the government to recognize the challenges we are facing and take measures or action that will address those challenges. So the core of the problem, now going to the heavy lifting that the government needs to do, is that we need to improve our foreign exchange earnings. That's the core of our problem. And we see anything contrary to that is we are actually trying to sidestep the problem. Jumoke and everybody here, and let me sound it clear that the challenge Nigeria has today is our foreign exchange earning has dwindled vis-a-vis our foreign exchange expenditure. So our currency has come under pressure. Our currency has shifted materially or devalued materially. And the implication of devaluation of local currencies is that anything that has import component will, or has a foreign currency component, will come to us at a higher cost, which is why we're dealing with the issue of fuel prices. And let me bring it down to a more basic level. Today, Nigeria, and in the first 3 months ended June 30th, 2024, that is between April 1st and June 30th, average crude production in the country was 1.41 million barrels a day. The previous 3 months, January to March 31st, average crude production in the country was 1.57 million barrels a day. So the 1.41 million barrels a day was a material decline from the average production of crude production of 1.57 million barrels a day, which means we lost about 160,000 barrels a day over the compared to what we were able to produce in the first 3 months of this year. What implication is that? That our foreign exchange earning dwindled, and therefore our Naira could not hold its ground. So Naira gave in, and because Naira gave in, whatever is imported we came to us at the higher local currency price value. And fuel not being an exception. But I'll go further and dwell more on fuel. What has happened is that in May last year, fuel price, government changed the fuel price to, I think, 580 naira or so. And the basis was that exchange rate was, excuse me, exchange is going to be about 750 naira to $1. Unfortunately, today exchange is about 1,600 naira to $1. So automatically, if you assume that Platts, that is the price at which a metric ton of fuel is sold, remain the same, it then means that the pump price of fuel will have doubled from that 580 naira or so that the government had projected when the said fuel subsidy was gone to what it is today. You will automatically see a material increase in pump price. Assuming Naira had strengthened from the projected 750 naira to $1 in May last year to maybe about 500 naira to $1, we would have gained 1/3 of the price or the landing cost of any product imported in the country. So instead of 580 naira, we would have been talking of something in the region of 350 or 300, and clearly less than 400 naira to per liter of fuel. Now, taking it to the Dangote aspect, which is a concern most Nigerians have always had, hoping that Dangote is a silver bullet that will address all our problems. And I had started this note on warning that unless we increase crude production, Dangote will not materially address those problems Nigerians are expecting. Because Dangote refinery is a 650,000 metric barrel per day refinery. Nigeria's crude production, I had mentioned earlier, was in the second quarter is 1.41 million barrels a day. And the entire 1.41 million barrels does not belong to the federal government, which is also a misconception a lot of Nigerians have. You have the international companies that are producing crude in the country. You have the local crude producers in the country. And I can tell you, because the government's failures in the past that made it difficult for government to fund joint venture cash calls, encourage government to put for what they call production sharing contracts, where the oil companies are the ones that make all the investments, and then they get a higher percentage of crude that is produced, unlike what you have under the JV, joint venture contracts, where the federal government was getting about 60% of the crude that was produced. So even if we take simplistic assumption that average Nigerian federal government share of crude production is 50%, 50% of 1.41 million barrels is 750 barrels a day. Dangote refinery is 650,000 barrels a day. So if government only had 750,000 barrels a day as government allocation, then it simply means the entire Dangote refinery can take the entire whatever is produced by the country. If that happens, then the federal government will not be able to generate any foreign exchange directly for national port to the national ports for every other thing you and I import. What that means is that our foreign exchange crisis will worsen because we won't even have any dollar to import anything. Unless Dangote will be magnanimous enough to dash Nigeria whatever dollar he makes from say exporting whatever the local economy will not consume. Because our local economic consumption is between 40 million barrels and 60 million barrels. Sorry, 40 million liters and 60 million liters a day. And Dangote will certainly be producing far above that. So, and again, the import of fuel as a share of our total import is just about 25%, between 23 and 25% of total import. So even if you take that, it then means that if we are to give Dangote all the crude that we produce, we will save about, if you add AGO, which is diesel, and you add aviation fuel and every other refined product we import, we will get to the region of 35% of our total import bill. So if we give him 100% of our total export products, we are going to save 35% of our import bills. So you can do the arithmetic. So the solution is that Nigeria has to produce more crude. I repeat, the solution Nigeria has to produce more crude so that we can give Dangote comfortably 650,000 barrels and still have maybe 2 million barrels to export. When we do that, we're going to have enough foreign exchange earnings. We're going to save about 35% of our import bills from the refined product Dangote is going to give us. And then in the next 6 months to 1 year, we will have stabilized our foreign position. Our foreign exchange reserve would have improved. And then Nigerian Naira will appreciate. So you're going to enjoy the full benefit of Dangote refinery because at that point, we can give him under domestic crude obligation. And then we can agree even if we agree with him, even if we have to give him at any agreed rate on the condition that he has to give us back the refined product at a lower than market rate. So that can be sorted out, but it will only come when we are able to produce more crude. Otherwise, we will be dealing with a situation where Dangote will be forced to import crude from other sources other than Nigeria. And then whatever Dangote imports, it will import in foreign currency. And Dangote will sell to us refined petroleum product in foreign currency at ruling exchange rate, which means at the pump head, the prices will remain high. I hope I've been able to wrap around the summary of the economics of crude pricing and refined petroleum pricing.
Thank you. That's a very good way for us to get this started. Thank you for laying the context. Pastor Sonny is in. I don't know if he wants to take over or he wants me to continue. But before I hand over to him, I have a follow-up question that is burning in my mind. It seems like everything is hinging on foreign exchange. on this foreign exchange rate, which is what we keep, wondering why, since we are the ones that are producing the crude. Then you also mentioned that we've lost production. What is the cause of this loss in production? Why is it on a steady decline? Does the dollar, does the exchange rate have anything to do with the loss of production?
Okay, why we have lost production is a multiplicity of factors, but I'm going to hit on the critical factors. One is that we have had a severe level of insecurity in Niger Delta for almost 30 years running. We've had the militants, we had all sorts of issues in the Niger Delta. So which we had kidnapping and all those things, so which scared away or drove away oil producing companies. Two, we've had for a long period of time where crude pipelines that convey crude to export terminals are breached, are broken, and crude is stolen. So if you are an oil producing company, you're producing on an offshore or onshore or shallow offshore asset where you need to export through the crude pipelines. So whatever you produce and you pop into the crude pipeline, you are going to get a fraction, an infinitesimal fraction of what you have produced. I've heard of instances where 90% is stolen or lost along the crude pipelines. So by the time you get 10% of what you have popped into the crude pipeline, it will not be able to cover your costs. So, and that had continued for a very long time. So that compelled many of the international community to exit the onshore and shallow offshore assets and go to the deep offshore assets where you have the production sharing contract, where it's difficult for the militants or whoever to breach, because there's actually no pipeline. From their wellhead, they pump into the export vessels. So, and unfortunately, the fiscal framework that governs the production sharing contract in deep offshore assets gives Nigeria minimal revenue or benefit. So that's one factor. The other factor is that it took us so long to enact the Petroleum Industry Act. And that simply meant there was no clarity as what was a governance framework and legal framework for people to invest in the upstream oil and gas sector of Nigeria. So that kept away investment for a long time. If you keep away investment, remember that the crude wells, crude oil producing wells are depleting assets. Whatever you produce today is depleted. So sometimes the wells that are completely exhausted and they are shut in because there's actually they are actually decommissioned, because there is actually nothing else you can get from those wells. So if you are not exploring new fields, if you are not increasing your investment in exploration and production, and you are only living on existing fields or wells, you are going to eventually exhaust those wells and you have to decommission them. So without additional fields and wells coming in on stream over a long period of time, you will see a continuous decline in your production, which is what Nigeria witnessed. So those are the factors. Like I said, there are multiplicity of factors, but let's dwell on the critical issues. One is insecurity in the Niger Delta regions, including the breach of crude export pipelines, kidnapping of oil workers, and a lot of community challenges they had faced. And then the issue that we had, it took us a long time to enact the Petroleum Industry Act. And for a long period of time, there was no clarity on the fiscal framework for investment in the upstream sector. And therefore, the investment was not coming. So while we were depleting the existing crude fields or reserves, we were not adding to the production. And over time, our production had tapered.
Thank you very much. I thought Pastor Tony was in. So you had actually gone into my next question, which is on the Petroleum Industry Act. And for those, I just want to read what it is. So the act is a comprehensive piece of legislation aimed at reforming Nigeria's oil and gas sector. The act seeks to create a more transparent, efficient, and attractive regulatory framework for both domestic and international investors, while ensuring that the sector benefits the Nigeria people. And you started to talk about what happened to this act, because it seems like that was like a silver bullet for us. And this act, Buhari signed this act August 2021. And how far has it gone? Why is it not, has it been effective at all in reforming the industry?
Well, the act, at least we have a certain or a definite fiscal framework for investment in the upstream sector of Nigerian oil and gas sector. Whether capital has begun to run after Nigerian assets is still a question. The first thing you have to bear in mind that I had mentioned that the insecurity had driven away investors. So you are left largely with local investors in the onshore and shallow offshore assets. So what are the other challenges that the local investors have to contend with? One is the issue of funding. They don't have the deep pocket that the IOCs have, who have been in this business for donkey years. So the local investors do not have that kind of deep pocket. Why the local investors are still contending, although at a better level, with the issues around breach of pipelines, stealing community-related issues. They also have to deal with the issue of funding, because I can tell you that exploration and production is a very capital-intensive investment. To explore and produce a well, you may end up spending as much as $20 million. That is not a chicken change by any Nigerian standard. So, and you obviously need capital, accessing capital from international funding sources. Unfortunately, we are also at an era where the international funders are shying away from investing in what they call dirty fuel. Many of them will want you to rather attract their investment in what they call clean energy. Not many people are so keen on investing in exploration. So you get to even attract capital to invest in crude production. Not all lenders are willing to do that. Added to the heightened sovereign risk of the country. Sovereign risk simply means there are risks associated with investing in the country, in Nigeria. And that risk is worsened by the insecurity had in Niger Delta. I had mentioned clearly or categorically that some of the challenges we have had to deal with is that when people produce crude and they pump into a crude export pipeline, and when the crude they pump into the pipeline gets to the export terminal where it is supposed to be loaded into the vessel, you may end up losing as much as 90% of it. So what that means is that the commercial viability of lending to a Nigerian who is into exploration and production within the onshore and shallow offshore areas is no longer compelling. So even with that, the lenders are reluctant. One, that some of them don't want to invest in dirty fuel or lend for dirty fuel production. Two, that there's no assurance that when you even produce, you're able to export and get your revenues to be able to pay them back. So these are some of the challenges that has made the Petroleum Industry Act not to be a silver. Of course, nothing is ever a silver bullet in human life, but the traction we all expected that it will be achieved when that act was passed has not been achieved. But that does not mean there are no gains. It's a slower rate of gain instead of, we don't have a big bang that obviously some people were expecting. So we have an incremental gain that is happening. But then we also have to push back from these challenges I just mentioned.
Thank you very much. Pastor Sonny is in, so before he loses network, I want to yield the floor to him. I know his network is sporadic, so we have him at the moment, and then I would follow up after him with some of the other questions that I have. Pastor Sonny, please go ahead, sir.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Chukwu Johnson.
Good afternoon, Pastor.
How are you, sir?
I'm very good, and you, sir?
Not bad at all. Great to have you, and thank you for all the work you have been doing. I think you are the next most popular face on all our television network.
I'm hearing that for the first time.
You have been speaking on various national issues, and We've been hearing you loud and clear. I think, like you rightly identified at the beginning, what we try to do on this platform and in the African Leadership Group is to really look for what the solutions are and try to make such suggestions or solutions known to the government instead of joining in bemoaning the problem. We thought that with the signing of the Petroleum Industry Act, the sector was going to be well deregulated. There was going to be free import. People will be able to sell at the prices they import, and that should help to moderate the price. But I don't think that has been the case. So clearly, either that PIA is not being implemented correctly, or it was never meant to work in the first place. You may want to address that. But I guess my question really is, which you alluded to, the challenge is we are not producing enough. Do you have an idea of what our total capacity is per day, assuming we are operating at full capacity? That's our ability to produce. Because OPEC quota, for instance, is 2 million, which we don't meet. I hear that we can produce up to 2.5 or more a day. And you alluded to the fact that it's been stolen. Is it that those stealing this crude, they are stronger than the government? Or is it the government itself that is stealing the crude? You are laughing, but we got to know.
But
So,
I've never worked in any security agencies to determine who steals the crude.
So, we really want to know. Buhari came with a lot of fire, and we are here where we are today. Tinubu is going on the same trajectory. What is the problem? Why is this problem unsurmountable?
Well, let me start from the tail end of your comment. No problem is unsurmountable, and I'll come back to that. No problem is unsurmountable. Everything we are witnessing today in the world, either created by God or created by man. So God said, let us create man in our own image and likeness. So they created us to be gods, and therefore we can create, which simply means nothing is impossible before us. So, but back to the issue of that the Petroleum Industry Act had made provision for a willing buyer, willing seller, market-driven and market-determined pump price for fuel and other energy sources. Yes. Like I said at the beginning of this conversation, that when the president said subsidy is gone, I think they moved the fuel price to about 580 naira per liter. That price was purely, fully with full cost recovery and reasonable margin for those in that line of business. So, but unfortunately, exchange rate moved. And when exchange rate moved to about 1,600, it simply means that the pump price would have doubled if you assume the plant will remain the same. So at that point, if you use a doubling of 580 naira, say you are talking of something like 1,160 naira per liter. So at that point, it became difficult for government to allow that price to rule at the pump head, because Nigerians were going through severe, or are still going through severe, cost of living crisis. So the absorbing capacity of Nigerians to pay the market reflective pump price became difficult, became constrained, and the government had to win. That some of us started shouting and that subsidy had come back because we couldn't manage our exchange rate, and because we couldn't manage the exchange rate, where the price of fuel had moved, the cost of fuel had moved up because of shift in exchange rate, and that if you have to price the pump price of fuel at the pump head based on the new exchange rate, that certainly the prices that were being sold at the pump was far below the planning cost of fuel, and that somebody was absorbing that difference. So the challenge we have is issue of managing our exchange rate. And the issue of managing our exchange rate takes us back to the same issue we are discussing, which is the issue of crude production. You had asked me what's our capacity to produce. I don't have the exact figure now, but what we have to bear in mind, like I said, each well has a lifespan. And as you produce a well, you find out that consistently your production capacity keeps declining, tapering down, because it's just like you go to a place where you have a lot of liquid. Remember, this liquid is in what you call rocks. or rock formations and soil formation. So as you pump out, the volume depletes, and the volume you will keep pumping out will keep reducing as you are pumping out more. So it's difficult for anybody, unless maybe Nigerian Upstream Petroleum Regulatory Commission may have an idea, but even then, that will be an estimate, a very wide estimate, because production, every liter that is barrel that is produced reduces the amount of reserve that you have. And then you also look at not all the fields where you have your reserve that have even tested for crude are being produced, because maybe they have issue of community crisis challenges, maybe they have issue of pipeline integrity, there's export pipeline integrity, now whatever factor that has constrained them from producing. But the key thing is that if we get our ass right, probably we'll be producing between 2 million to 2.5 million barrels a day. That at some point, we are driving to produce as much as 3 million barrels or more, which I believe, if we resolve all the issues in the Niger Delta region, it's not out of play that in the next 1 or 2 years, Nigeria should be able to produce as much as 3 million barrels a day. So, so back to what I said, I'm going to emphasize that there is actually nothing that's impossible for us to do, or that our problem is not insurmountable. If you cast your mind back, for those of us who are old enough, in 1994, there was genocide in Rwanda. That the last human genocide was actually in Rwanda, in Africa. But today, Rwanda is a shining light for the entire African continent. It's where even Nigerian governors are going for their retreats, because leadership redefined the economics and the social environment in Rwanda. So the challenge we have is we have to deal with leadership, which is why I consented to be part of this conversation. We have to continue to emphasize, to push the narratives that we need the leaders to focus on national interests, instead of pecuniary interests. Because the reality is that if the leaders are focused on what's in the best interest of everybody as a people, then decisions that they take will represent or reflect those priorities, which is the issue we are talking of. Who is stealing the crude? Is it the people, you and I, where you and I don't even have the capacity to go to the Niger Delta region, or the government, or the forces, the security agencies? The reality is that, and I'm going to conclude this statement from what late General Sani Abacha, when he was the president, what was it? Was the head of state of this country. He said that if there is insecurity, or if there is insecurity in any part of the country, and it festers for more than 2 weeks, then the government is either complacent, or it can actually be attributed to the government, or the government is consented to it, or however you want to put it, that the government is guilty of not taking the necessary action. I don't want to use a very strong word, but the basic thing is that Nigeria is a big country. We have the capacity to address our problems, but we must be determined to address those problems. And it is at the footstep of those in power. If they want to resolve these issues, they can resolve it. These issues in Niger Delta was even more severe than this. At some point, Yar'Adua knew that a gunboat strategy would not work. He invited all the militant heads to Abuja, sat down with them, had the presence of mind and the humbleness to even sit with them, some of them not educated, hear directly from them, and made them offers. And we had a respite, and crude production improved materially. The key thing that we must have a way of reconciling our national interest with the interests of those in the Niger Delta regions. You cannot have a national interest and spread the resources in the backyard of somebody when the person has no benefit in whatever you're exploiting or whatever you're taking out. We must, as a people, develop an overarching policy that ensures that we marry the national interests of this country to produce more crude with the interests of people where the crude is being produced in their localities. There is already an attempt to do that under the host community trust fund which is a component of the Petroleum Industry Act, where a percentage of the expenditure of oil-producing companies from any locality will be reinvested in that locality or put into that host community trust fund for improving the standard of living of the people, as well as for the next generation of people in terms of investing in future assets that have the benefit of helping those who come from that area. We must drive such policies and ensure that people are happy that crude is being produced from their place because they have something to get from it.
Thank you very much. I mean, you've been very explicit without necessarily calling out, but what you have said is leadership must be focused on doing what is right for her people. You gave the example of Rwanda. I will ask you two questions together, and they are related. One is the pricing of this petroleum product. It seems for like forever, nobody has been able to clearly define to us how this pricing of this product is being done. It's been so opaque from the time that, I mean, we are still fully dependent on importation. They tell you it comes to the port, there's charges, they call all manner of charges. I just want to know, from the time we have not really known how much our government subsidizes, but we have gone past that stage now, and we are with the Dangote refinery. Dangote came out to say that his petrol could be in the filling station in less than 48 hours if everything is okay. And it took another week or two before the petrol started going out. People say they were negotiating. What exactly were they negotiating? Dangote knows how much how much his cost of production is. If government wants to buy it off him, let's say, for example, Dangote says, I want to sell for 700. And government says, okay, we buy for 700, but we want you to get to the market for 500. So we are subsidizing 200. That is simple enough for everybody to understand. Why is government so secretive, everything very opaque? What is so difficult about Dangote saying, this is how much is my fuel? Government says, okay, this is how much we are buying from you. We want to subsidize. And so that subsidy scam that they are talking about will not be there anymore, because the subsidy will only be going to one source and everybody knows what the subsidy is.
Okay. Unfortunately, I'm not privy to the negotiation between Dangote and NNPC on the costs at which Dangote was selling, or the price at which Dangote was selling to NNPC. But what I will say is that NNPC came up with their costing template, which showed that they were going to buy from Dangote, that the pricing of the first loading that from Dangote was at a plat of $690 per metric ton, and that which was about 52 equivalent of about, because they are 1,341 liters in a metric ton, which that gave them equivalent about 52 cents. And they also said that they were paying a premium for each metric ton of PMS they were buying from Dangote, $46, which gave them another figure of about 55 cents. So in effect, they had about 57 cents. By the time they converted that to Naira, they got to a figure of about 1,000. They got a figure about 898 Naira to a liter. Then they added logistics costs. They added payment due to NDPRA, Nigerian Midstream and Downstream, NMDPRA, and other costs. And they arrived at a cost pump price of about 950 Naira, 50 kobo or so for Lagos, and about 1,018 Naira for a place like Maiduguri. So that can be regarded as a template. But remember that when you have a fully deregulated pricing mechanism for PMS, the price per pump at the pump head will change on a daily basis. Because if you are a trader, you will observe that every minute, if you are watching the trading machine, the price of ice will move every minute. The price of plat will move every second. So as those prices are moving, so will the landing cost of fuel will move. Also will the Dangote's price move, because this is a byproduct of crude, because crude prices will move every second. So when we have a fully deregulated market, you're going to see a situation where you can go to the pump today and maybe buy at 1,015 naira and go back later and they tell you they move their price to 1,016 naira, or that the price will come down to 1,000 naira, depending on what's happening in the global market for crude. So then on the issue of subsidy, I had mentioned earlier that because of the severe cost of living crisis, most households in Nigeria cannot reasonably afford a formal increase in pump prices, which simply meant that the government had to cap at some point, though they had claimed earlier that they were not paying something, cap the price at which we buy fuel at the pump. So at that point, they were obviously accommodating subsidy or absorbing subsidy. So those subsidies they were absorbing must also have been varying on a daily basis. Like I said, it depends on which price the landed product. The landing cost will change every day when you land a product, unless you go into forward deals. If you go into forward deal, you can actually agree with Dangote, you know what, we're going to be buying from you. Let's agree on a forward contract. And that forward contract says, look, we'll buy from you at 800 naira for the next 6 months. So you lock him at that. If prices are going up, he won't get the benefit. If prices are coming down, you will not get the benefit. So you lock in on that in the forward contract. Unless we enter a forward contract, the price of fuel will change on a daily basis. So if we decide that, if the government decides to cap the price at the pump, then it simply means the amount that the government will absorb on as a subsidy will change at every point when there's a change in crude price and a change in Plat.
Fantastic. So you are saying as far as I'm concerned, we've never really had a substantive minister of petroleum in the last 8 to 12 years. In fact, like since democracy came, it was only Julie Jonathan's era that we really had a substantive minister. So you, Johnson Chukwu, if you're a minister of petroleum, what will you be doing? How will you solve this conundrum that we find ourselves today? Or you may want to advise the Minister of Petroleum. And I'm sure you know him.
Who is he? Please tell me. Well, I think what I've been sharing with us are my thoughts as it relates to the industry. And that basically, if I'm in a position to execute, because that's what the executive arm of government does, is our focus on those issues. I'll start by addressing the issue of crude production. Like I said, we need to have a major alignment between our interests as a country and the interests of those who live in places that are being despoiled from crude production. That's a starting point. We must have a...
So on a practical level, what will you do to address that?
Okay, on the practical level, in the short term, which is in the short term, I will go into a forward contract with Dangote and whoever else is willing to go into forward contract with me. And then that forward contract will agree on the plant price that they will supply us product for the next 6 months. That will give me some breathing space to focus on improving crude production, and so that I can further, when I materially increase crude production, I can go into a crude swap with the Dangote and any other refinery is willing to enter into such agreement with me, so that I supply you crude and then you give me back refined petroleum product equivalent value, and then take your commission or fee for refining for me. But again, those things are also stopgap, short-term measures, short to medium-term measures. The ultimate objective will be that we will need to build an economy where you and I can comfortably afford basic things of life, necessities of life, including buying fuel at the market rate. It's only when we get to that point when Nigerians can comfortably pay for fuel at market rate. Remember, I also said we'll focus on addressing crude production, so that when I address crude production, then I think what you're asking me is what the president should do, not what the minister will do, because it goes beyond what the minister will do. It involves several other facets of governance or government. Because if you improve crude production, you're going to stabilize the exchange rate and possibly see Naira appreciate. There's no reason why you and I shouldn't drive, the government shouldn't drive towards a robust economy with a strong export that Naira could be trading at 500 Naira to $1. If that's happening, then pump price will drop to about 300 Naira, 200 something Naira, and everybody will be fine with that. But your currency needs to strengthen, and according to strengthening, in the short term, it can only come from export of crude. In the longer term, we will improve our industrial base and begin to export finished goods. So that's what I would do. Short term, immediate is going to export contract with local refinery, which is Dangote refinery, including other local modular refineries, go into forward contract with them, lock the price, so I can pass on the benefit of a lock price to the citizens while I focus on improving crude production so that we can have enough crude to give to the refineries, look at Dangote and other refineries, so that we can do crude swap. That is at the time when we have to maintain pump prices. And hopefully, as the economy stabilizes and the exchange rate strengthens, we can remove that cap and allow market forces to determine the pump price. Because at that point, Nigerians can afford it. If fuel is selling for 400 Naira, 500 Naira, I'm sure we won't be having this conversation. Most of us could have lived with it without complaining. And then, if that is the market price, and the major challenge we have is the exchange rate pass-through effect of exchange rate devaluation on the pump price. If we reverse that, we'll have a lower pump price, and Nigerians we can actually have a fully deregulated market where you and I can actually buy a product from Dangote or from a Vitol or BP or anybody who is going to compete to sell product to us at market competitive rate.
Excellent. We are taking note, and we hope to pass on all of this in a summary form, probably to the government and see what they can do. Thank you for sharing those thoughts. Let me just add one more question so that I hand over to Jumoke so that other people can participate. And I know you're an economist also, so you speak on this quite a lot. They say inflation has come down to about 32.something%. Food inflation has come down. And somebody asked me once and said, Pastor, I know you also are an economist, you're a banker, you've been there. How come all you people keep telling us that inflation is at 32%? He told me Indomie has increased by over 200%. Rice went up by over 400%. He counted about 10 staples. None went up by less than 100, 200%. Fuel, more than 200%. He said, so we say, what is it that you people are calculating that when you say inflation increased by 32%, and what I see when I go to the market is everything that I mentioned to you have increased by more than 200%. What is it exactly that you are calculating? How do you arrive at your figure? And I said, I will ask Johnson Chukwu. He's the bigger man.
Pastor, I'm not the bigger man, no. Okay, the measurement of inflation figure is basically to say, look, what was the price? For instance, we're talking about August inflation. What was the price in August last year? And what is the price of rice in August this year? Last year, inflation figure was about 25%. Okay, as August inflation about 25%. Okay, so if price of rice in August 2022 was 100 Naira, assuming rice is a proxy for all the commodities we consume. So to make it simple, Yeah. So, and then the price of rice became 125 Naira, from 100 Naira to 125 Naira in August last year. Then you would have said that the inflation rate is 25% because 25% above the 100 Naira. Then then when you want to measure inflation in August 2024, you are no longer measuring from 100 Naira. You're now saying, what is the price now? So assuming the price has moved from 125 to 150. Okay? So the 25 on 150 is now 20%. So you will say in August 2024, inflation rate is 20%. But you and I will say, but rice is now 150, it was 125 last year. How can you say it's 20%? Because you have measured the increment from a base, and the new base is the August last year's figure. So for an average household, when they are hurting and saying, look, price of rice has gone from 125 to 150. And you are telling me inflation has moderated from 25 to 20%. How can that be? But I hope you understand what I'm saying. I guess most of the listeners. So inflation is the incremental change in the price of a commodity over the price of the base period or the base time. So in this case, whereas price has moved up further, but the magnitude of that movement, when you compare it to a higher base, because you're not talking of a higher base, instead of 100 naira, you're talking of 125 naira as a new base. So that's a higher base. So, but if you want to get the context of it, for an average household, if your income has not changed over the past 2 years, then your cost of living has moved up from 100 naira to 150 naira. So you've lost about 50% of your purchasing power. And that's when Nigerians are hurting. So in that case, what you could buy last 2 years, August, you can only buy 50% of it today, assuming we're using the same narrative I used. So when they say inflation is at 2.15% for August, it simply means that on average, the basket of goods and services that Nigeria consumed by Nigerians that measured by the Bureau of Statistics has increased by 32.15% over the figure they were as August last year.
Okay. You have left me more confused, even as an economist. When Tinubu took over, let's make this comparison. When Tinubu took over, the base rise of price, for example, was like 30,000 per bag last year, May, just using May. But as at May this year, that same rise was almost 70,000. So what's the inflation rate?
Well, for that singular item, you can actually say the inflation rate is more than 100% because you're talking about 40, increase of 40 over 30. So it's actually about 130%. But remember that we are not talking of a basket. And the problem with what we call averaging, because that's basically what they do is averaging. When you talk of a basket, you're talking of you have tomato, you have potato, you have yam, you have rice, you have transport costs, you have the clothes cost of your alcohol, you have non-alcoholic beverages, you all put them in the same basket. Some have increased by 100%, some have increased by 20%, some have remained constant. So when you now put the weight, then you will now have the weighted average increase. And that's the problem with always averaging. We are telling people, look, my height is about 5'10", 5'11", 5 feet 11 inches. And then you have another man who is 6'5". And then you have somebody who is 4 feet 2 2 inches. And then you put the three of us together. So there are three men here in this room. What's the average height? They tell you the average height is maybe about 5'11" or 6 feet. 6 feet. And then you say, wow, when you come, you're looking for a 6-footer. But you wouldn't see any 6-footer among us. You have this man who is a Lilliput, who they have increased his height because there's a man who has 6.5 feet. So that's the challenge with average. So I hope that put in context. When you look at the basket of commodities in that is measured or surveyed by a Bureau of Statistics, some of them would have increased, like the rice you're talking about, has increased about 130% increase, but you have some that would have increased by 10%, 20%. When they put the weight, they will not tell you that average inflation is 32.15%. But bear in mind that food inflation in the month of August was 37.52%. It was previous month of July, it was about 39.53%. It was actually dropped from about 40.87% it was in June. So if you take out food alone and you measure food inflation, it's actually higher than the all-item inflation because those other things whose prices are not moving up are weighing down the prices, the average of those whose prices have moved up materially.
All right, thank you. Just a final shot. So interestingly, what we see going forward is that life will never get better for the average Nigerian. And the reason I say this is when they say things have to get bad before they get worse, it can never go below where we were before. So when this government came into power, for example, we made fuel at a certain level. Prices were at a certain level. Now, if that comes down even by half, we are still nowhere near where we were when they came in. But I'm sure they will be thumping their chest and say, we are done well. All right? But actually, they have made us worse off. So that's the lot of the average Nigerian. So where we are now, we are buying fuel outside of Lagos, for example. I'm in my village, okay? That's why my network is not very strong. Fuel here is 1250, 1,250. And this is not too far from Lagos. So I'm sure the further you go from Lagos, the more the fuel gets very expensive. So if that fuel now comes down to 800 naira tomorrow, we'll be jumping and happy that the government has done something. Whereas when they came, fuel was where it was and people were living. They said, oh, we are living a lie. So exactly what will be a good life for Nigerians? We are not talking about the quantum of money, but what the money can do for you. People simply don't have that money. And then yet what it can do is diminishing by the day. So what is the lot of the average Nigerian?
Well, there are two ways to improve the living standard of the citizens.
Yes.
What we are referring to is what we call deflation. Deflation is very rare in any economy. You can see price adjustments, downward price adjustment in critical items like fuel. We've seen normally in the harvest season, which is why we saw inflation rates moderate. We have increase in production of food crop like yam, tuber, potato, and others that are harvested around this time. So you could see such adjustments, downward adjustments. But apart from a situation where prices are correcting downwards, the other factor that will leave all of us, restore us where we're corrected, is if our income improves. Your income will improve, productivity of the economy improves. If you and I can get jobs and then our salaries are reviewed upwards, and when the salaries are reviewed upwards, there is no commensurate increase in prices of goods and services. So our standard of living will improve if our income catches up with the change or in price level. So what happens in other countries, in other more advanced countries, that labor unions renegotiate wages based on changes in the cost of living. So if cost of living moves up, they will negotiate wages above the increase in cost of living so that they will maintain the same standard of living. For us to achieve that, we need to get a situation where our economy is growing and growing at a faster rate than what is growing today. And then we also must make sure that several facets of the economy, several sectors of the economy are expanding. Unfortunately, that is not the narrative today. In fact, the sector that we are used growing faster have about all declined. The sector like telecommunication sector grew on about 4.4% last quarter. This sector was growing at close to 10%, consistent for a number of years. So even the sector that we are propelling growth are all slowing down. And the key thing is that the government should focus on how do we stimulate stronger economic growth? How do we identify sectors that have both strong growth opportunities and create incentives to support those sectors instead of imposing taxes? Governments should not focus on a narrow narrative of how do we want to generate revenue for government. And because that is self-defeatist. And why do I say self-defeatist? The approach of government should be, how do we grow the pie? How do we expand the economy? Why do you want to tax an economy that has dropped to 250 or so, less than 250 million barrel, 250 billion dollars? An economy that used to be $500 billion is now about $220 billion. The priority should be, can we grow this economy to $1 trillion, $2 trillion? And then even if you do that and even reduce the tax rate to 20%, 20% of $1 trillion is $200 billion. And that becomes the economy we are to the government. Why do you want to take 50% on the $220 billion we have? There's one thing we say in the economy is that tax is a leakage. Because when you take out tax from business, they are not able to invest more. If you take out tax from individuals, they're not able to consume, and the consumption stimulates production, because consumption is what drives demand and production. So when government keeps sucking out liquidity from all of us, company and individuals, they are defeating one of the key cardinal factors in economic growth. And that's why some countries that have actually grown their economy quickly had very low tax rates that encourage investment. And when investment keep coming to this economy, United Arab Emirates is a live example of a country that grew their economy by having almost a zero tax rate that encouraged people to invest in their economy. And over time, those investments have become so big, the economy has become so big, they now introduce value-added tax and other taxes, and they now can tax on a larger base. So the government should not just focus on, we just want to take whatever is available to all of us who are struggling to make a living.
All right. Thank you. It's just been brought to my attention that there was a press release by Dangote. You alluded to the fact that Dangote said their fuel was $8.98 and all of that, but
no. That's an NNPC that said they were buying from Dangote at $8.98. That the loading they did. The NNPC came up with the publication on their pricing template that said that they are buying at Platt, and they even specify that they are buying a 10 ppm, which is parts per million. That's the quality of where they were buying from Dangote. They were buying a metric ton at $690 per metric ton, and they were paying $46 per million per metric ton. It's from Dangote, not from Dangote, it's from NNPC.
Okay, all right.
That's how they arrived at the 898 naira per liter that they said was the cost they were paying Dangote for the fuel. That's NNPC. I'm not sure I've seen any cost or pricing that Dangote has published.
Okay, all right. I hear there's a press statement being circulated purportedly from Dangote saying that they are not aware of that claim that NNPC made. So I don't know if it's real or not, but it's up in the air on what it is. So I want to thank you very much for putting some more light. Maybe the way we normally do it is the participants on this platform will also engage you, probably disagree on some of the things you have profiled. Some may agree, but that's the way we do it here. And we just rub minds and see what works best for the country. So Jumoke will take over and handle the Q&A session. Maybe she has one or two more questions of her own. So thank you very much, Johnson Chukwu. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Pastor Charles.
Just Pastor Sonny, yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So we are now in the questions or participants' questions and comments section, and we would have you raise your hand. I see, Uncle Folabi, you had your hand raised up. So the way we do this, we usually take 3 in groups, and I can also help note the questions. Some could be questions, some could just be comments. And just because in the interest of time, we ask that you group all 3 of them together and then address them as quickly as you can. So Uncle Afolabi, your hand was up earlier. I don't know if you're still interested in asking your question. If you're not, I would go ahead and ask. Okay, yes, you are. So I've asked you to unmute. Please go ahead and ask your question.
Yeah, good evening. Thank you very much. Right now, Dangote is not fulfilling and making up to the current daily supply of petrol that it was agreed to be doing. So, and it's causing economic disturbances. Now, my real question is, why we're having to rely on Dangote refineries right now? Why are the real reasons, why are the Nigerian refineries, the Nigerian-owned, federal government-owned refineries not working? NNPC assured us that a couple of them would be working by April. We're now in September, and they are still not working and up and running. And yet, at the same time, salaries are still being paid to workers in the refineries. That's the number one. And number two, there are many tankers that are diverted to neighboring countries rather than being sold to Nigerian or being going to Nigerian petrol stations. What can we do to truly discourage this and let the petrol that's been for Nigeria be sold in Nigeria? Those are my 2 questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to ask Pastor Funke and then Professor Aluko to please go ahead go ahead, Pastor Funke, ask your question. I believe we've asked you to unmute.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you, my dear sister Jumoke. Well, I'm just thinking, from what you relayed to us right now, I believe that most of us Nigerians were in cuckoo line in the sense that we think that having oil is all, is the riches we expect. But from what you have unfolded, I can see that there's a lot more capital involved. And basically, I want to ask, are we able to afford these things? Because you spoke of the, in some words, the superior nations, the ones that have been at it for a long time, and we're having to compete. And really, really, when we look at it, because the argument is that our own oil is being sold back to us. And is this because we really cannot afford to refine our own products? I'm asking. Because you ruled out a lot of things that, the effects of the products that we have out there, the effects of the economic situation. I studied economic history, and I don't see, that's why I was asking online, are we operating on the laws of diminishing returns so that, we cannot really afford the life that we're living? And so we will always be in that stage of discrepancy, and all that. And then also the hyperinflation that we're experiencing, is this something that is really weighted trading constantly and we don't have the experts on it, or they're not listening to the experts? What's the way forward for Nigeria? Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to get the third question from Professor Aluko, and then we'll ask you to take those, and then we'll go to the next set. Professor Aluko, please go ahead with your question, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chukwu.
Thank you, Prof.
I see you on TV all the time, and I think we've met at some point, yeah.
Yes, I'm sure we have met. I salute, sir.
How are you doing?
I'm fine, sir.
A few issues. I want you to comment on, you had indicated the fact that we lose a lot of our oil from insecurity and lack of investment with wasting assets. A number of issues here. Can you comment on the speculation that actually our metering too is an issue? Either metering at the wellhead or metering at the meters, that they are seriously tampered with. And the fact that actually the amount of oil that we say either we are producing or we're exporting is far more than is recorded. And that's even why sometimes either the IOCs or whoever still continues to be around despite all the challenges that they have. I want you to have that in your mind. The other issue is the fact that the statement that Nigeria is really a gas regime with an oil rim and not vice versa. You've not said anything about our gas and our so much focus on oil and forgetting even the non-associated gas. Okay, we agree that associated gas is also dependent on how much oil we produce. But there's so much on non-associated gas that we can work on. I want you to comment on that. And the last issue is on subsidy. There is no country that does not provide subsidy to its citizens. But when you subsidize production and you subsidize consumption at the same time, or when you subsidize those who can actually pay, then you're actually you're actually transferring money from the rich to the poor. I want you to make a comment on that and see whether it is not because we have been spoiled by fuel over the years, and now we are having to pay for it, and it's a withdrawal syndrome. We're actually in a withdrawal syndrome, and that's why we're all complaining about the subsidy removal. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Can you take all three questions? Do you need me to remind you of anyone, or you have all three of them?
No, I can take them.
Okay. Thank you.
But please permit me, as a mark of respect for my boss, to start with Professor Luko's questions. So, Professor Luko's first question is, I should comment on the speculation that there's a lot of stealing, or there's a lot of miscomputation or miscalculation. There are several terms they have used for that in the volume of crude that is measured at the pump head, at the wellhead, and as well as what is measured at the export terminal. That is part of the symptomatic challenges we are dealing with. Issue of corruption, and I've traditionally sidestepped the issue of corruption in this conversation. But the fact is that all the regulators are available at the pump heads, at the wellheads, on the pump head, the wellheads, and they all measure what is pumped into the pipeline. But then there's also a natural pipeline loss. Even if there is no stealing, there is a natural pipeline loss, which you have to factor in determining what you get at the export terminal. But the key thing is that where there is a wrong measurement or the calculation is wrong, it simply means that somebody is compromised, including those officials who are supposed to be the watchdog to ensure that such is not compromised. So our problems are plenty, like they say in Nigerian Palace, but they are not insurmountable. We also need to strengthen our law enforcement agencies at all levels, which will take me to a question I was asked on this the volume of crude refined product that is taken to other countries. But I'll come back to that. So this issue have come up, including the NNPC has actually come to say that the losses that are reported are not as huge as they are because they are wrong measurements at the wellheads. But I think it goes beyond that. I've related personally with some oil producing companies, and they have told me they've had instances where they received only 10% of what they pumped into the pipeline, into the crude export pipeline at the export terminal. So that cannot be from issue of wellhead wrong measurement. There's clearly somebody is stealing this product, and it's either the person is working in tandem with regulatory and law enforcement bodies, or the person is so powerful that those other forces decide to look the other way because they can't enforce, do their job. So that's my take on that. But clearly, it's there may be some wrong measurement, but it won't be as material as the kind of losses that are being reported. The other thing they mentioned, Prof, is the issue of that Nigeria is a gas country. But I'm happy you also made reference to the fact that a lot of our current production is coming from associated gas. Gas production is coming from associated gas. So gas production will increase only when crude production increases. Yes, we have some few that are purely non-associated gas, but a lot of instances where we need to produce those gas, we need to also produce crude. And you have to determine how you treat the crude before you start producing the gas. And I've always had predicted that when power supply would decline, once I see a material decline in crude production, I say, look, watch it. They are going to see a decline in power production, in power generation, because most of the gas going to the power generation companies are coming from associated gas are coming from crude production. So ultimately, the government should focus on incentive. And I know the NNPC came out with was it early this year or late last year, that they were going to auction fields that are purely gas fields. I don't know how far they've gone with that, so that people can actually know that they are basically exploring and producing gas. But then, even the gas evacuation pipelines are few. Apart from EPS, there's Escavo Lagos pipeline. I think they have EPS 1 and EPS 2. Most of the gas infrastructure have not been built. The Ajaokuta gas pipeline has not been completed. That was supposed to take gas from the Niger Delta region up to Ajaokuta and bring gas to Abuja. It has not been completed. It's been in the work for quite some time. So even if you currently produce non-associated gas, you need the infrastructure to transport that gas to where to be used. And we still don't have that infrastructure. There's a lot of investment needs to go into gas infrastructure, gas transportation and distribution infrastructure. for us to make non-associated gas production very viable. And then on subsidy, you asked if we are facing a withdrawal syndrome. Like I said in my comments, some of the challenges we have, which is why we have not have a fully deregulated petroleum pricing environment, is because the absorbing capacity of the Nigerian household to pay higher prices for fuel is highly diminished because of the cost of living standard we are facing today. Like you rightly said, Prof, there's no country that is that does not have subsidy. But the question, you decide what you want to subsidize. The rational thinking is that subsidize production instead of subsidize consumption. But in a situation like we have today, where Nigerians are not getting a lot of things that other people get from other countries, they are obviously holding on to this as the only item of benefit they get from the country. It does not justify that we should subsidize fuel, but the reality is that our situation has made that compelling. In a place like America, they subsidize the farmers. So you find out in America, one of the cheapest things you can ever get is food, because they want to ensure that the economy has food security. In Europe, they subsidize farmers. And then in China, they subsidize a lot of industries, including some of the construction companies operating in this country, because they want to export labor out of their country. And they also want to export technology and also want to achieve some level of economic dominance or competing with the West. So our country has to decide what would we want to subsidize. Whatever you're subsidizing should have a trickle-down effect of stimulating productive activities and creating employment. But I don't think we have thought through how we want to position the economy as it relates to what do we want to give negative tax for so as to stimulate its growth. Now I will now go to the first question. Why are the refineries working? I hope, Prof, I've been able to respond appropriately to your questions. So why are the refineries not working? What I would say is going to be a comical response. The reason why the refineries are not working because the reason why Nigerian Airways has folded up, Nigerian Shipping Line has folded up, what do you call it? The stadiums and the stadiums are not functioning. The railway line is moving in fits. I mean, the railways are moving in fits. So because Nigerian government have shown consistent lack of capacity to run anything that looks like a business venture. So same reason why we're having the refinery not working. And I've actually said the refineries have actually, most of them have actually passed their useful life. The FCCD of most of the refineries have become obsolete. And so we need to actually build new refineries. But I think the government should not focus on building refineries. Government should focus on a regulatory environment that will allow private businesses to build refineries and compete among themselves. The Nigerian government had NITEL. NITEL got a license the day MTN got a license. Econet got a license. Nigerian NITEL license was actually underwritten by government because the government that gave them money to pay to government. Today, where's NITEL? The day they started operation, they already had the infrastructure that none of the other people had the infrastructure to compete. Those people have built their cell sites and communication facilities. NITEL had vanished because NITEL belonged to government. NITEL was eventually sold to the private sector after a long delay. But what I'm just saying is that the Nigerian government has shown consistent lack of capacity to run any business. So it's not strange. What had affected NITEL, affected Nigerian Shipping Line, affected Nigerian Airways, it's what had affected the refineries. How do we stop the smuggling of petroleum products? Well, economists have actually said that if we have a market reflective pricing, that there won't be any arbitrage opportunity for those who are taking refined petroleum products from Nigeria and going to the neighboring countries. That's one logic. And that's also a plausible logic. But added to that, I will also say that there is no border outpost that is not manned. There's no crossing that is not manned or that we are not aware of. With technology today, you have GPS that can monitor every truck that moves out of your country. So if the government wants to police the borders, they will police the borders. The government must live up to its responsibility of providing security for the citizens, including policing the borders. That does not take away the easier approach to say, look, if we have market reflective costing, that it will be difficult, it will no longer be attractive for people to take the product from Nigeria to Benin Republic or to Cameroon or to Mali. So that's on that. Then there was a question, why can't we afford to refine our own products? Or can't we afford to refine our own product? There's nothing that stops from refining our own product. It's just we have to get the legal and commercial framework right. If we get the legal and commercial framework right, we should be able to refine. There are a couple of people Dangote has the biggest refinery in Africa, if not the world. As I understand, it's one of the biggest single train refineries in the world. There is a Edo refinery, there's a Water Smith refinery, there's a Niger Delta refinery, these are modular refineries that are also operating and commercially viable. Because one of them is my friend, and he has been telling me that they are commercially viable. So we can also create a physical and legal framework that will allow you and I, or those people who are rich and are into business, to go and set up refineries, but they must be assured of feedstock. And for to be assured of feedstock, we must make sure we produce more crude, so that when we feed those local refineries, we still have enough to export. And possibly get to a point where we're also exporting refined petroleum products and getting not just income from crude export, also income from refined petroleum products. What are the ways to address the hyperinflation? Well, what we have is not really hyperinflation. It's high inflation rate, but not hyperinflation. But the key ways to address the inflationary pressure we're facing today, we need to stabilize the exchange rate. To stabilize the exchange rate, we have to increase crude production. The other factor is to improve food production. The major pressure we're having is from food inflation. Food inflation, like I said, came at the print of 37.52% in the month of August. That's quite materially high. And why do we have such high rate of food inflation? Because we have insecurity in the major food base of the country, North Central, Northeast, and Northwest, plus some challenge we have in the southern part of the country. So if we address the issue of insecurity in the food base of the country and allow farmers to go back to their farmland and start producing, we will feed ourselves. We won't be dealing with this kind of high inflationary figures. Those are how we're going to deal with inflation figures, address the issue of exchange rate by producing more crude and exporting the incremental crude, so that you have more foreign exchange earnings to stabilize the exchange rate, so that the pass-through effect of naira devaluation will moderate, while as we make sure we have better, higher level of food production in the major food belts. Then I believe if we do that, in a short while, we should begin to see material moderation in inflation rate. I guess I've taken all the questions I've been asked so far.
There was a part B to Uncle Afolabi's question about many tankers are diverted to neighboring countries. How do we curb that?
No, I actually responded to that.
Okay, I missed that.
I said
so I have, go ahead.
If we have a market reflective cost pricing at the pump heads, there won't be incentive for that arbitrage, because arbitrage is basically because there is some subsidy in Nigeria. So if you load the products here and you go to Cameroon or go to Nigeria where there's no subsidy, you sell at commercial rate, and just imagine that it's incentivizing that. But also said we need to strengthen border security. There is customs, there's immigration. There are several agents of government at the borders. There's no reason why we shouldn't use technology, GPS, to track movements across our borders and ensure that we'll reduce it to the barest minimum.
Thank you. So we have one hand up, and then we have a couple of questions in the chat room. So I'll just read out those questions from Madam Bolade Thomas. What stops the government from putting together a think tank to brainstorm on what is best for the country? I think the government executives can't accomplish this economic task. Citizens are suffering amidst plenty. Then another one, why are our presidents taking on the role of oil minister? Then the last one from the group is, why do we punish Nigerians with high cost of petroleum products to stop smuggling, when all the government needs to do is read the Riot Act to security agencies at the borders to stop smuggling, or get fired and persecuted? I think you addressed that as well. So we would take Professor Grange. Go ahead, ma, ask your question. I've asked you to unmute.
Okay, can you hear me now? Yes, okay. Thank you very much indeed. I think we've learned a lot again about the economy of petrol and gas. Not so much about gas, but of the petrol. It's very obvious that the government cannot manage this business. So how are we going to make sure that, they get to know this and they withdraw from it, and and get it to the investors, and let it go, I think, private. Do you think that that would solve the problem? Having said that, can you also give us something on what has happened to the imbroglio between Dangote and the government? It seems that the problem has been the marketers in between them. Who are these marketers, and how can the problem be resolved? Thank you.
So you have all those questions?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And
Okay.
then I have a couple of my own when we're done.
I remember that Faye promised me we're going to finish in 1 hour 30 minutes.
We're almost there.
Okay. Okay, the first question, what stopped the government from putting together a think tank to address the economic challenges in the country? Unfortunately, and it goes with the second question, why is the president the minister of petroleum? Why can't he hand over that portfolio to somebody else to do? Unfortunately, I don't think I have answers to these two questions because they are the footsteps of the president. I think the president has actually assembled an economic team. I know some of my friends are part of the economic team. I don't know if they have been making recommendations to the president and the president has been implementing those recommendations, or they've not been making recommendations, or the president is not accepting it. I don't know what's going on, but I know there's an economic management team set up by the president, a very high-level economic management, of which people like Aliko Dangote is even a member of that economic management team. So I know Jim Obia is part of that team. A couple of, I know Doyin Salami is part of that team. I know Bismarck Rwanda is part of that team. So we have a team that should be advising the government, but there's a difference between advice and execution. Advice is provided to you to make a choice, and people who advise you give you options of choices to make. It is your decision to make the choices. I don't know, like I said, I don't know what's going on between in that space. On whether the president, why wouldn't he? Well, it's a choice he took. President Muhammadu Buhari was also the Minister of Petroleum for the 8 years he was in power. So I don't know what informed their decision to superintend that ministry. Maybe I think they are in better position to answer that. How do we make the government to know that they cannot manage the petroleum industry? I think that's one of the reasons why we're having this kind of gathering or this kind of engagement. Like I said, the job or the benefit of this is that we can put together our thoughts, the benefit of collective wisdom, and then find a way of conveying it to government people. I guess maybe one or two government officials may be in this forum, but even if they're not there, if they get to know about it, some of us appear regularly on TV, and what the reason why I spend my time or waste my time to appear on TV, because I said, look, I cannot keep quiet. If I'm in a position to speak, I will speak, and let it be that it's unheaded, that those you are speaking to do not take it, but I'm not going to go to my grave and say, look, I knew what to say and I kept quiet. I would that day, no matter how bad the situation gets, I always tell myself, look, did I do my own part? If you call me to serve this country, and I think I'm going to serve under a person who will listen to me, I will serve. But if the person who I think will not listen to me calls me, I will not serve. But I will continue to speak my mind on what I think. I may not be correct, I may not be accurate, but basic thing, and all of us have a civic duty to communicate our thoughts to the government, find channels to communicate the thoughts with the government. And within our sphere of influence, make sure we live a decent life that people will say that you are saying these things, you're also living it. And then, but as far clearly, like I said, Nigerian government has not proven, not in one instance, to be capable of managing a business enterprise. So government should completely divest itself of the thoughts that we're going to manage any business enterprise. Create the right environment, create the right legal framework, create the right commercial framework that will incentivize private sector investors to go into those sectors. We have a proof of concept. Today, the telecommunication sector accounts for 20% of Nigerian GDP, 19.9% of the Nigerian GDP. 30 years ago, let's say 25 years ago, it was zero. It was zero, it was less than 1% of our GDP. Policy environment. For donkey years, we are trying to make night a work. Today, Nigerians can basically get a SIM card for almost 0 naira. But it was difficult for us to have phone work under government ownership and management. So in effect, government should share away from that, create the right framework, and private sector capital will come into those sectors, including the oil and gas sector, including the downstream oil and gas sector, midstream and downstream oil and gas sector, which is what we're discussing. Then there's a question as, is the problem the back and forth that we've been inundated with or been regaled with? Is it the marketers that are causing it? My thinking is that the marketers are not yet even involved. The issue of lifting of refined petroleum products between Dangote and NNPC. Volume of crude refined product Dangote is producing are available for lifting is between Dangote and NNPC. The pricing is between Dangote and NNPC. The marketers are not importing. I'm not aware that they're imported. The marketers are at best in a position to distribute what NNPC lifts from Dangote. So I think we amount to passing the buck if we now begin to point fingers at the marketers. They are not yet playing any role in that engagement between NNPC and Dangote. All these disputes, which I think are not necessary, I see between Dangote and NNPC. I guess my take is that there must be a mechanism for reconciling differences between NNPC and Dangote. NNPC owns 7.2% of Dangote refinery. So NNPC is the single largest investor in Dangote refinery other than Dangote himself. So there's no reason why they should be fighting in the public. Whatever areas of disagreement, whatever clarity they need to have between themselves, they should set up a mechanism that they communicate and resolve that. I'm personally irritated with every day you open the newspapers or listen to radio and Dangote has said this, NNPC has said this, Dangote has said this, NNPC. I think it's they're actually sowing the taste of the refinery we are all looking forward to. I think they should pull away from that. It's not in our interest. It dampens the excitement we should have from the start of operation of Dangote refining petroleum and refining fuel. I think that I've taken all the questions.
Thank you. And we're not going to keep you beyond the 1 hour and 30 minutes Faye has promised, for just a few minutes. And in your closing remarks, I would like you to touch on some of the recommendations that you had talked on earlier on. You talked about insecurity in the Niger Delta area. You talked about when I believe it was Abacha that was in government had dialogue with the militants or the perpetrators of this, and they came to an understanding. So that's one recommendation. And we keep talking about the government. And over the past, at least most of us have been alive, we've seen so many different administration come and go. But the real issue is the civil servants, because they are the ones that operate all these different agencies. So when we talk about the government, it seems like we as Nigerians, we absolve ourselves of our responsibility because we are the ones that are managing these enterprises. The Nigerians that were in Nitel that went south ended up in MTN, but MTN is functioning, Glo is functioning, right? And so on and so forth. So if you can also speak a little bit about we, the Nigerians in civil service. And then you talked about PTF fund. I unfortunately had a very brief stint with HiPrep for a few months, and I actually had to run just because of the level of corruption there was on those funds that are supposed to go towards rehabilitating the Niger Delta area. But these were not really government officials. They were Nigerians. They were the elders, the community chiefs, and all those that wanted to be paid before anything could happen in the area. So I want you to please address we, the citizenry, as part of this recommendation, because government, but there is a role that we as citizens need to play in ensuring that we have that Nigeria of our dreams. And you talked about PTF funds. So those are my questions, if you could have that in your closing remark. Sir Charles, I'm sorry, we are coming to a close because Mr. Chukwu has to leave he's 10 minutes over the time that we had promised he'll be here. So apologies that we can't take any more questions, unless you say we can, but I don't want to keep you more than we really need to. So if you could address that in your closing remarks, and let me see if I could sneak in a few things for you to address in your closing remarks. Yes, please go ahead, sir.
Okay, Jumoke, let me, I think it's also Pastor Jumoke, Abi?
Well, I've been anointed pastor, but I haven't been ordained pastor.
Okay. Okay, what I would say is that, I had actually put myself forward and said, look, as a matter of principle, I made a commitment to myself and my family that I will represent some values and that I'm not going to speak, I'm going to walk my talk. I'm not going to say something and do a different thing. And I think a lot of us Nigerians, particularly those of us who are called ourselves Christians and also Muslims, should be able to put ourselves forward and say, look, I stand on by this, and these are the values I stand by, and I'm not going to compromise them under any circumstance. I always ask, well, how much does a man need to live? One is that you need to take a decision that whatever assignment is given to you, you must discharge in a way that you will remember for doing a great job on that assignment. That's the starting point for us as individuals. But even at that, we still need leadership. Leadership defines the value system. Leadership defines the culture. Leadership defines channels collective energies into a purposeful objective. If you don't have clarity in leadership, you don't have a visionary leadership, you don't have a leader that can actually motivate people and that can walk his talk and lead by example. Leaders are symbols of the values and the attributes of a society. So the challenge we have had is that we have had leaders who do not represent those values. So we need to also bear in mind that in as much as you and I are doing our own, no matter what we say today, if the leaders do not pick it from whatever we said and do their own part, we will not be running in circles. So Nigeria, I pray, and they tell you that hope is not a strategy, that we're going to continue to talk about leadership and hope that those current leadership positions should do some level of introspection and ask themselves, am I achieving am I living the life of a good leader? What will history judge me? Is it going to judge me by what I've accumulated while I was in a position of authority, or the legacies of the values I created for the society, generations even yet unborn? So let them do some level of introspection and ask themselves, are they doing the right things? If the motive and objectives are right, I can tell you the actions will align with the general objective of Nigerians. Having said that, we must, as a people, continue to do our own roles, play our own roles. It's not going to be, we shouldn't expect a light bulb effect where we just switch on put on the switch and every place brighten up. We're going to see a gradual recovery if we get the policy environment right. But a lot depends on the people in positions of leadership. And I personally think they are not doing enough, or they are not living up to my own personal standards. Maybe they're living up to their own personal standards and maybe living up to the standard of people, but I've actually taken time to study leadership globally. And I have seen transformational leaders who have transformed backwater countries into titans in today's world. And that's what I expect of my country.
Thank you very much. And I hope we all rise up to that place of leadership in our own sphere of influence and begin to change from within, whether it is in our communities, you mentioned in our churches, and just be that reflection of the change that we wish to see. Thank you so much. Do you have any parting words for us, words of wisdom that we can take away apart from all the other great nuggets that you have dropped on this platform as we draw to a close? Are there any parting remarks that you want to share with us?
Well, what I would tell us here, I want to believe that most people here are Christian, but even if they are not Christian, they would have heard of Goshen in Egypt. The vision of Pharaoh that Joseph interpreted did not stop the famine, but it was able to prepare the Egyptians to weather the same years of famine with enough supply. We, as heads of family or support heads of the family, should try to build a Goshen for our families to ensure that we our family members do not suffer so much of the severity of the challenge that the country is facing. I want to believe that this challenge will not be there forever. I can't promise us, but I can say that we have seen countries have gone through war situations and they're now symbols of admiration. I mentioned Rwanda. Look at Vietnam today. Vietnam is now turning into a hub for manufacturing activities. In my youth, we used to hear of Vietcong, Vietnam War, but Vietnam has turned the corner and is becoming a country of celebration. China is the first country in the world to eradicate abject poverty. China in the 80s was depending on food handouts from the Western countries. China has grown its economy over a period of 30, 40 years to become the second biggest economy in the world, and is actually beginning to breathe down the neck of USA. Malaysia, Singapore are countries that were backwater countries that have turned the corner. So Nigeria, we all pray we one day turn the corner. We only pray that it happens in our lifetime so that we can look back and say we were part of those that made Nigeria a great country. Thank you, everyone, and thank you for having me.
Thank you very much. We started with this gift, and I'm using the word gift, of loving Nigeria and pushing for the good of Nigeria is actually a gift that each of us has, and we cannot relent in trying to push for that good that we're looking for. So thank you very much, Mr. Johnson Chukwu. We appreciate your time here on this platform. And before we close, I want us to just remember those in Maiduguri that are suffering from flood. I want us to remember Bonu in our prayers, the families that have been displaced, those that have lost their homes, and even those that have lost family and loved ones. And this is part of our irresponsibility as government to safeguard our people. We're not going to go into what happened in Bonu now, but these are Nigerians that are suffering. These are Nigerians that have lost their lives and lost their homes just because of mismanagement and corruption. So please remember them in your prayers, and remember Nigeria in your prayers. We remember our leaders, that God should continue to just move our hearts, we as a people, that we actually have a rethink, moral reforms, that we begin to do what is right by ourselves and for the country. We continue to pray for each other and then hold each other responsible, hold each other accountable. Those that are in government, they are your brothers, they are your sisters, they sit in church with you, they sit in mosque with you. Hold them accountable and ensure that they are working for the good of the nation, not for their own personal gain. God bless Nigeria. God bless us. God bless all of you. Thank you for being here. And again, sincere apologies from Mr. President. He's in the village with no network coverage, and hopefully that will change very soon. But he sends his regards, and he really sends his appreciation for your continued participation on this platform. We are so glad you could join us this evening. We have a form I posted a form in the group, in the chat, for you to please engage with ALG. Next week, we have Professor Commissioner Bolaji Aloko on the hot seat, and we have all kinds of questions. He's a government official, so he's going to be joining us next week. They are the ones that we are going to be holding accountable for what's going on, but I'm sure he's ready for it. So same time, same place, same Zoom link, just a different topic and a different speaker. And you have it here. It's Professor Aloko next week that would be our guest. So thank you everyone for joining us. Continue to pray for our nation, continue to pray for good governance, and we'll continue to pray and uphold each other. Thank you and have a very good evening. God bless you.
Amen.
Thank you.
Thank you. God bless you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good job, Bob.
Thank you, Jumoke. Well
Thank
done.
you,
Thank you,
Jumoke.
Mom.
Thank you.
Thank you, Auntie.
Mr.
Thank you,
Chukwu.
Mom. Thank you, Mom.
God bless you.
I love you, everyone.
Thank you. Wonderful, wonderful.
Thank you, Mom.
You see why I
Thank
had
you,
to
Mom.
come here to see how friendly everybody was, you know. So.
We may not be as friendly next week because you are honorable commissioner. We want to hear all you're doing in Ekiti State, and we will hold your feet to the fire.